Thank you all so much for joining us for this panel. And I have to say, it's rare to get a panel as high-powered as the one we have here, because this really is Indian bureaucracy, all the top elements right here with us. It's sometimes said that it's a bureaucracy that's really been responsible for taking India forward and actually governing India for more than 100 years. And that's probably as true now as it is before. So we have with us people representing various facets of Indian bureaucracy, and they've been playing various different roles from it, from the people out here, from running the railways to running Indian transportation, to running the Indian telecom sector, to being in charge of foreign investment and how industrial policy can be better promoted, and the person who's in charge of planning and leading the whole thing. They're all here with us. So without any further ado, let me just introduce the panelists that we have. Amitabh Kant, Chief Executive Officer, National Institute of Transforming India. And of course, Niti Aayog is one of the main organizations that's spearheading a lot of the changes that we are talking about. Aruna Sundararajan is the Secretary, Department of Telecommunications, one of the most crucial sectors, I think, for a lot of the new technologies and others that we are talking about, really been responsible for transforming the face of India. The mobile phone is most people's preferred device these days, and probably more important than anything else in their lives. So, and you're in charge of all of that. Ashwani Lohani is the chairman of the board of Indian Railways. It's Indian Railways, of course, one of the most important areas in the economy. And if railways is important, so of course is road transport and highways. So we have Yudhvir Singh Malik, their secretary, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. And finally, Ramesh Abhishek is the Secretary, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion. Thank you all so much for being with us. The entire steel frame of building India is here. Maybe, Amitabh, if I could get you to start off. At the various levels of bureaucracy that you also have represented, is it still as true today as it was in the days of the British Raj and in the heydays of the IAS, that the bureaucracy pretty much is responsible for taking India forward, and I might add, sometimes holding India back a little bit, and I'm talking about red tape?
Well, India is very functional, very vibrant democracy. It's an elected democracy. And the bureaucracy works in partnership with the elected government. And actually, in the last few years, many of the things that we've tried to do in recent times, like pushing for radical changes in terms of biometrics, or pushing for electric vehicles now, or pushing for artificial intelligence, which he would be doing, or pushing for road construction, rapid rate of road construction, taking it to 22 kilometers a day, or Ashwani trying to bring in radical changes in the functioning of the railway, is all, firstly, trying to create a lot of, we are an agent of change, because we are trying to bring in a lot of disruption in the government functioning in terms of taking India forward. But we are also very positive instruments of change in terms of constructing of roads, construction of railways. So sometimes people on the other side of the fence may think that the bureaucracy tends to be status quoist in nature. But the fact remains that the government has grown rapidly. India is growing at about 7.6%. And the challenge for bureaucracy is to accelerate that pace of growth, take it to even higher levels over the next 3 decades for the next 3 decades.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because you're right, bureaucracy has often been called status quoist, and sometimes the government's been accused of not moving fast enough, not doing enough big bangs. Right now, you're having exactly the opposite allegation being made, that how many big bangs are you guys going to do in a 9 to 10 month period? And are you doing so many big bangs that you've almost sort of nuked the Indian economy in the entire process? Obviously, I'm talking about demonetization immediately after, followed by GST, and who knows what else is around the corner.
No, the problem is that the government is moving very rapidly, that the private sector has become too status quoist now. Because, when you're asking for the big bang, and when you do structural changes, major structural changes, you make India into a one tax, one country, you push for making India a more formal economy, you push for far more transparency in land transactions. these are structural changes being made with a perspective of the next 2 to 3 decades for India. And it's important if India has to grow at high rates, or if India must, you can't be a $10 trillion economy with half your economy being a black economy. It's not feasible. You can't grow with several layers of tax. So these are major structural changes, and I think we need to take a long-term perspective on this.
Okay, who else wants to come in on that? Bureaucracy is moving much faster, and industry is almost becoming status quoist. Is that a...
We have actually been able to skill 11 million people in the last 3 years. And our challenge is to skill 400 million people. So when we are talking about the government going too fast, you just look at the kind of things that need to be done, the magnitude of the work that needs to be done. Highways, the speed has picked up. Railways, 30% of the goods are being transported by railways. It is 10 times of the cost of transporting through, 1/10 of the cost of highway. 70% of the goods are going through road. Virtually no river transport. I think we need to go very, very fast on so many things. And people have no patience actually, because they are so fed up of this lethargy, this sloth, corruption, this bad infrastructure. They're just fed up. So I think the government and bureaucracy are moving quite fast, and rightly so.
So the speed is a good thing, even if it causes short-term disruption and dislocations. Sometimes the problem with too much speed, of course, is that not all policies are completely thought of. That's also nothing wrong with it. Like at the GST now, there's talk which is taking place as we speak about how can we fix some of the things that actually went wrong in the rush to implement it quickly. Is that okay? Is that something we should accept?
See, one of the hallmarks of the government today is very responsive and sensitive. And the government is not cussed or inflexible that nothing is being done about the feedback. So many changes are being made. I think the important thing is to listen to people, do something about it, fix the problems, but you cannot deviate from the road that you have taken. That you have to make structural reforms in the economy. You just can't stop things. It's so much easier to not do GST. It's so much easier. People will be happy with 7.5% growth. But do you want to grow at 10%, 12%? For that, you need to do some fundamental changes in the economy. But I think the government has bitten the bullet, and they have taken a tough decision, and that is good in the country's interest.
If I could turn to you next, Arunaji, because yours is another sector which has played such an important role already in transforming India. As I said, the mobile phone is, for most people, an extension of their lives now. Very few people can imagine life without a mobile phone. You can imagine life without lots of things, but not life without your mobile phone. But as that keeps happening, as changes keep coming, questions will come. And right now there is a lot of distress in the sector, a lot of indebtedness is there, companies are shutting down, jobs are being lost. So how should people view the way the sector is proceeding right now and progressing?
Vikram, I just want to take up what you had spoken about a little earlier. And I think somewhere, in the recent past, India's, just crossed an inflection point. One, there's exploding aspiration, and a government has taken charge which wants to deliver quickly. And people have waited for 70 long years, and there is still so much to be done. So I think it's the pace of acceleration that we've seen that is driven by the desire to respond to the kind of aspirations that we're seeing all around. And certainly in that, I think the bureaucracy has to do much more. And I think if the bureaucracy is not doing its due diligence, then the bureaucracy is squarely to be blamed. But the private sector also needs to do much more, because what has not happened in these last 70 years is that all our goods and services, all that we've been trying to do has largely been targeted at about 200 million people. There are another 800 million people out there, and whether it's the public sector or the private sector, we really need to start responding to those aspirations. We still have to do 80% more. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of data. We're all saying data is the new oil. The data explosion has just begun. So I think there's a lot more to be done. And India is a very vibrant, robust market. And therefore, I think both the medium-term and long-term prospects are very robust.
So that's another example of, for example, you'll have new players coming inside, and suddenly data prices crash, everything crashes, usage takes off, 10x growth in data consumption in a 10-11 month period. Flip side of that is the disruption that we were talking about. There are companies going bust, jobs being lost, and the rest of it. In your view, is it important to manage the change or say, look, we have to go, hell for leather, proceed really, really fast, and if there are casualties along the way, then that's just something we have to deal with, including companies complaining and saying, this is being unfair?
Look, government is very aware that we need to provide an enabling environment, and we need to provide the level playing field. I think as long as we respect the market and the rules of the market, and as long as government respects, where we need to lay down the rules of the game, I think, we have, enough space for everyone to grow.
Right. Mr. Lohani, if I could just turn to you next, because in a sense, a lot of what is happening in the railways is a reflection of that. How high are you aiming compared to the reality on the ground? So, for example, the bullet train obviously is a great idea, and if you actually do have the whole of the country linked up with bullet trains, it would be wonderful, it would speed up things. But that's when you have a lot of people saying that here you're thinking of spending 100,000 crore rupees on the bullet train, even though most of the money is coming in from Japan, at a time when you're having Elphinstone-type stampedes taking place, at the time when safety is not perfect, at a time when normal day-to-day services and railway lines are not good enough. So instead of aiming for the moon, should we be trying to just fix what we have?
Both consolidation as well as growth, they have to go in parallel. To set right the existing organization with all its constraints, that is one side. But at the same time, we should not lose sight of the fact that we have to catch up. We have a lot of catching up to do. Right now, our average speeds of trains, a train which carries passengers is about 45 to 50, and a goods train is about 23. We have to look much beyond that. So while we are going to set right our system, that we are already on the job, setting right the safety thing, the passenger amenities and all those, the slots which you talked about. But at the same time, we are also looking at high-speed trains, that they are the call of the day. We are looking at creating new corridors for freight. We are looking at creating corridors for a mid-high speed segment like 160 kilometers per hour. And I frankly believe that both have to go hand in hand. System is pretty solid. It's not that the system has gone haywire, but yes, we can do much better.
The quality of services still is not necessarily world-class of Indian Railways, the sort of passenger amenities, and safety, of course, is a major, major concern. Now, Railway Minister yesterday was telling me, was telling me in an interview that we are not going to save even a rupee on safety. We are going to spend everything which we possibly can, which is good to hear. But I guess it's also partly a question of priorities, right? There is a limited sum of money available.
As far as safety is concerned, we realize it's priority number one, the focus number one. We can't just cut corners on safety at all. And this line we are following right now. And see, safety as well as passenger comfort and even things like punctuality, they are basically a symptom of a disease which is somewhere else. I just don't have a button by which I press that button and the safety improves, I press another button, the passenger amenities improve. No. It is a sum total of all the activities which we are doing, all the actions which we are doing. And we are going to change our processes en masse, looking at our processes relating to decision making, our processes relating to contracting, and all that will ultimately reflect in better safety. Even now, we have got a couple of accidents recently, and that created a different image perception, but the reality remains that the total number of accidents have actually gone down over the years.
If I can turn to you finally, and I think the reason I've come to you finally, of course, is also because in the example of roads and transports and highways, few people will dispute the fact that the faster they roll out and the more that they're rolling out, the better it is. Now, Mr. Gadkari and others have often had very ambitious targets, saying we're going to take it up to 30, 35, and really take it forward. I just wanted to get your sense of where the roadmap is, and are we again rolling out the big highways? Is that what the priority should be? Rural roads? How do you see the sector rolling out?
The idea is that we should have a national highway network of about 2 lakh kilometers. That is what my minister's vision is. With today, from 91,000 kilometers 3 years back, today we are at 1,15,000 kilometers. Given this pace, we have to take it to that situation, because with 2% of national highways of the total road network, we are carrying about 40% of the traffic. But simultaneously, there is a constraint, and which is where the ministry is acutely conscious of it, that the personal private transport is increasing at a CAGR of 10% plus. If it continues to grow at this rate, then probably we would need to add one lane every 3 years, which is a huge challenge. Therefore, comes the transport side, that the focus has to be towards, a shift from personal private transport to a public transport. Yeah. Today, I would have about a gap of about 10 lakh buses. And if you want to shift this car moving private transport people, then you need good quality buses.
Wouldn't you say it's a real opportunity for India, maybe because the roads are whatever they are and the state of transportation is whatever it has been, India could potentially leapfrog by taking a far greater leap in, let's say, electric vehicles, or finding how India is going to be a player 10 years from now in the autonomous, self-driving sort of vehicles and that form of private transportation or Hyperloop or whatever it is. Is that some of the thought process that you're doing? Let's be one of the first to go electric instead of being one of the last.
As a matter of fact, the first pilot is already on. The minister in his constituency in Nagpur, there are 500 electric cars which are running as taxis for last more than about 6 months with electric charging stations and parking slots. That is the first pilot which is already going on. But coming on to the national highways as well and adding on to it, I think, Vikram, we have to appreciate one thing, that the rate at which the expectations of people are going up is far higher as compared to the rate at which we are trying to catch up. And that is the rat race. Today, when I get mails accusing me, people are not saying your road has potholes or cracks or this. Of course, that also comes. But they are saying riding quality is fine, but the road marking is not good enough. Which means the rising expectations are getting on to that level, which we have to meet. Okay. And that is where we have to work faster.
Is India planning to be all electric at a certain stage, perhaps faster than people are expecting?
Well, we would look forward to it. He is working on it. He is driving.
Yeah, I was about to throw the question to him next.
But electric vehicles policy, he is working on it. As a matter of fact, we would love to get.
So are we going to be the first in the world to move to some of these things?
Let me first add to what Yudhvir was saying, and I think he was making a very important point, that your cities have to be driven by public transportation. That is the key. You can't make cities for cars, you have to drive it by public transportation. That's the crux of it all. Electric vehicles is critical. Now, our view is that the internal combustion engine today in India, India is a champion in automobile and auto components. The automobile sector accounts for almost 7.2% of our manufacturing output. It accounts for if you look at the manufacturing, it accounts for 7.2% of your GDP. 49% of your manufacturing output comes from the automobile sector. So whatever you do, you have to cause a disruption. But whatever you do, you have to think global size and scale. That's number one. Think global size and scale. You can't do it for domestic market. You have to think exports, number one. Number two, the tipping point will be around 2026 when the cost of the battery would have fallen. Because 50% of the cost is battery. The cost of the battery in 2026 would have come down from $273.
Could actually surprise you. Who knows? Things seem to be moving faster than anybody was expecting.
So $273 to $73. And by 2030, actually the number of cars of electric vehicles would be more than internal combustion. India must use its frugal engineering skills, its ability to innovate, its ability to do entrepreneurial spirits and skills to penetrate global markets for electric vehicles.
Why don't I throw that to you? Because one of the things that you keep hearing is that we should prepare for the big changes that are coming. What is here at the World Economic Forum, perfect place, I guess, to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. AI, nanotech, biotech, these are potentially the areas that the countries that are going to dominate 5 to 10 years from now will be the countries which are leaders in this. What are we doing with lithium? How are we managing long-term lithium supplies? What is the policy on nanotech and biotech? And how do we encourage investment and in artificial intelligence, for example? And why is it that China seems to have a lead in patents and not India? Are those the sort of concerns that you think Indian bureaucracy is really sitting and thinking about at a great length?
The new industrial policy that we are working on has a very important element on how do we do a smooth transition to Industry 4.0. AI, robotics, additive printing, IoT, all these are extremely important areas for us. We have set up an actually expert group on AI how do we integrate AI policies into our industrial policy. So, and we have very innovative and smart people, including startups, who are working on all this space. They are doing fantastic work actually. But then our overall R&D spend is very low. If you just talk about innovation, we are spending less than 1% of our GDP. Korea spends more than 4%. I think we need to not only spend more on R&D, we also need to get more results from the R&D spend. And these new technologies are absolutely the area of future. Recently, government is setting up 4 experience centers containing all these technologies of the future of smart manufacturing, so that any unit, any entrepreneur can go and see and experience how these are working. And I think these are also great opportunities for our large MSME sector. We all know that our MSME sector suffers because of also, by and large, most areas, lack of the latest technology. I think we have to make them smart manufacturing ready, industry 4.0 ready.
At the end of the day, whatever the changes are and whatever the transformation is happening, the average Indian has way lower connectivity or access to good quality bandwidth or data than most of the other countries do. And that's something which is going to end up holding us back. And let's face it, there is a huge digital divide which is still there in place today.
You're absolutely right. I think there's probably no country in the world which has more at stake in the digital economy and society than we have. And fortunate thing is that India is also the fastest digitizing nation in the world. Today we are indeed working on building those information highways. The BharatNet program, in 2014 we were at about 314 kilometers of optic fiber which had been laid, but now as we speak, it's actually reached 75,000 gram panchayats. And by the end of this year, 100,000 gram panchayats. That will mean that at least 100 million more rural Indians by the end of this year will actually have access to optic fiber. Similarly, let's look at what's happening in digital payments. We had around 1.5 million points of sale, electronic points of sale, till about November last year. But in the last 10 months, that has been almost tripled. So by the end of this year, we expect that we will actually go up to around 4.5 million points of sale. So what that will mean is that a lot of people...
But it still will be only a small fraction of the total number of transactions.
It will still be a small part of it. But the point is that is precisely why everyone is in a hurry. The government is in a hurry. We do need to get much more fiber out there. We need to build these networks. So you're absolutely right. We don't have the luxury of time. We need to all get on with it.